a first-person revenge story, at 9:03 on a Monday morning. I walked into the ballroom of the Westbridge Hotel and saw my own obituary on a 20-foot screen. My photograph was in the center. Under it were the words, "In loving memory of Claire Morgan, founder, wife, sister, and visionary." 300 people were standing in silence. My husband was at the podium, pretending to cry. My younger sister sat in the front row, wearing my mother's pearls. And on the table beside them was a contract worth $480 million. It would sell the company I had built from nothing. They thought I was dead. More accurately, they needed everyone else to believe I was dead. I stood at the back of that ballroom in a gray coat, rain still shining on my shoulders, and waited for my husband to say my name. He did. Then I closed the doors behind me. But to understand why the room went silent when I walked in, you have to understand what they had done to me 6 months earlier. My name is Claire Morgan. I was 42 years old, married for 11 years, and the founder of Morgan Modular, a construction company based outside Nashville, Tennessee. We built emergency housing, small medical clinics, and temporary schools. Our buildings were not glamorous, but they went where people needed them. After tornadoes, floods, fires, and hurricanes, our crews could put a safe roof over a family in days instead of months. The company began in my father's old repair garage. My father, Henry Morgan, could fix anything. Trucks, generators, broken windows, bad wiring, even the old kitchen clock my mother dropped during an argument. He used to say that most things were not truly broken. They were only waiting for someone patient enough to understand how they fit together. When I was 26, a tornado tore through a small town west of Nashville. I watched families sleep in cars while insurance companies argued and contractors waited for permits. I went home, sketched a simple modular house on my father's workbench, and told him we could build it fast, strong, and cheap. He looked at my drawing for a long time. Then he said, "All right, let's prove it." That first year, we built 4 homes. By the time my father died 12 years later, Morgan Modular employed more than 800 people in 6 states. I was the founder and chief executive. My husband, Ethan, was the chief operating officer. My sister, Natalie, ran public relations and community partnerships. From the outside, we looked like a perfect family business. That was the first lie. Ethan and I met at a charity event in Atlanta. He was charming in a calm, careful way. He never fought for attention. He listened. He remembered small things. On our 3rd date, he brought my father a rare set of old American-made wrenches because I had mentioned that Dad collected them. My father liked him immediately. I loved him for that. Ethan joined the company 2 years after we married. At first, he was good for Morgan Modular. I built fast and trusted instinct. Ethan slowed me down when I needed it. He negotiated better contracts, improved our shipping system, and knew how to make nervous bankers feel safe. But success changed the balance between us. Reporters called Morgan Modular my company. Employees came to me with big ideas. Governors shook my hand at disaster sites. Ethan stood beside me in photographs, smiling, while people asked him to move so they could get a clear picture of the founder. At home, he said, he was proud of me. At work, he began correcting me in meetings. The corrections were small at first. A number, a date, a detail that did not matter. Then he began speaking over me. Then he started holding meetings without me. Whenever I challenged him, he gave me the same patient smile. "You're exhausted, Claire," he would say. "Let me carry some of this." I thought it was concern. It was rehearsal. Natalie was 7 years younger than me. When our mother died, I was 19 and Natalie was 12. I became half sister and half parent. I helped with homework. I attended school meetings. I sat beside her bed when she woke from nightmares. She was bright, funny, and naturally beautiful. She could enter a room full of strangers and leave with 20 new friends. That made her perfect for public relations. It also made her dangerous. Natalie knew how people wanted to see themselves. She could make a selfish donor feel generous and a dishonest politician feel honorable. I told myself she used that talent for good. I ignored the way she treated assistants. I ignored the expense reports that never quite made sense. I ignored the fact that she wanted the rewards of the company without the years of work that created it. My father saw it more clearly. 2 weeks before he died, he asked me to meet him alone in his attorney's office. He looked weak that day, but his eyes were sharp. He said, "Ethan wants control. Natalie wants recognition. Those are not the same hunger, but either one can burn down a house." I became angry. I told him Ethan was my husband and Natalie was his daughter. He nodded. "Family tells you who deserves a chance," he said. "Character tells you who deserves the keys." Then he signed several documents and placed them in a blue folder. I asked what they were. He said, "A fire door." I did not understand. After his funeral, the folder disappeared into years of legal records. I forgot about it. Ethan did not. The betrayal began with headaches. They came late in the afternoon, always after I drank coffee from the executive kitchen. My hands would shake. My heart would race. Sometimes, I lost pieces of time. Once, I found myself standing in the underground parking garage with no memory of leaving my office. Another time, I woke at 2 in the morning in our guest bedroom. Ethan told me I had screamed at him and thrown a glass. I did not remember doing it. The next morning, Natalie arrived with tears in her eyes. She said, "You scared him, Claire." I stared at her. "Scared him how?" She looked away. That small movement hurt more than an accusation. Ethan began keeping notes about my behavior. He said it was for my doctor. Natalie encouraged me to take a leave of absence. Our family physician referred me to a private psychiatrist named Dr. Samuel Voss. Dr. Voss had a soft voice and an office filled with expensive books. He asked about stress, grief, sleep, and family history. Then he prescribed medication. The medication made everything worse. I became tired during the day and restless at night. I forgot names. I lost track of conversations. At a board meeting, I presented the same slide twice. Ethan gently touched my arm and finished the presentation for me. Everyone saw. That evening, a video appeared online. It showed me stumbling outside a restaurant while Ethan helped me into a car. The caption said I was drunk. I had consumed half a glass of wine. Morgan Modular's stock was private, but we had outside investors, government contracts, and lenders. Rumors mattered. Within days, 3 board members asked for a confidential health update. Ethan defended me publicly. Privately, he was building the case that I could no longer lead. The night everything changed, I stayed late at the office. I had begun to suspect that someone was altering our financial reports. A disaster housing contract in Louisiana showed $12 million in transportation costs. But the trucks had traveled less than half the distance listed. I printed the invoices and put them in my bag. At 11:40, I left through the east parking lot. Rain was falling hard. The security lights reflected across the pavement. My car was waiting where I had left it. As soon as I reached the highway, I knew something was wrong. The brake pedal felt soft. I pressed harder. The car did not slow. I tried the emergency brake. Nothing. A red light appeared ahead, and a fuel truck was crossing the intersection. I remember gripping the wheel. I remember the horn. I remember thinking that Ethan would be angry because I had not answered his last 3 calls. Then I turned the car toward the ditch. The impact broke 2 ribs, fractured my left wrist, and cut a deep line across my forehead. But it did not kill me. That was not the plan. The plan required me alive, confused, and discredited. I woke in a private clinic called Briar Glen, 2 hours outside Nashville. The room had no phone. The windows opened only 3 inches. My clothes were gone. A nurse told me I had suffered a severe psychiatric episode and attempted to harm myself. I said there had been a car accident. She said there was no accident report. I asked for Ethan. She told me my husband had arranged the best possible care and requested that I not be disturbed. I asked how long I had been there. She said 9 days. I tried to leave. 2 orderlies stopped me. That afternoon, Dr. Voss appeared. He said I had become paranoid and dangerous. He claimed I had accused Ethan of stealing money, accused Natalie of conspiring against me, and deliberately driven my car off the road. I told him the brakes had failed. He gave me a sad look. "Claire," he said, "acceptance is the beginning of recovery." That sentence terrified me, not because I believed him, because I realized he needed me to doubt myself. For the next 3 weeks, I pretended to improve. I swallowed pills, then hid them under my tongue. I smiled during therapy. I apologized for things I had not done. I told Dr. Voss I understood that stress had distorted my thinking. And I watched. The clinic staff changed shifts at 7 in the morning and 7 at night. The evening supervisor checked the hall at 10:30. The security camera near the laundry room turned left for 6 seconds every minute. One nurse was different. Her name was Mara Ellis. She was in her late 50s. With gray hair and tired eyes. She never asked me to admit I was unstable. She only asked whether I was in pain. One night, while changing the bandage on my wrist, she whispered, "Do not drink the orange juice tomorrow." I looked at her. She did not explain. The next morning, a staff member brought breakfast. The orange juice smelled faintly bitter. I poured it into the bathroom sink when no one was watching. 2 hours later, Dr. Voss arrived with Ethan and a notary. Ethan looked thinner. His eyes were red. He took my hand and performed grief like a man in an award-winning movie. He said the company was in danger and needed temporary stability. He placed several documents on the table. One gave him expanded control over Morgan Modular. Another transferred voting authority from my personal shares to a trust he managed. I read the first page twice. Then I began to understand the orange juice. They expected me to be drugged enough to sign. I let my hand shake. I let my words come slowly. Then I signed the name, Clara Morgan. Not Claire. Clara. The notary did not notice. Ethan did not notice. Mara did. After they left, she entered my room and closed the door. She said, "Your blood samples were replaced after the accident. Your records say you had enough sedative in your system to explain the crash. But the original sample was clean." I asked how she knew. Her jaw tightened. "Because my son died here," she said. He had been admitted for addiction treatment 2 years earlier. The clinic billed his family for experimental therapy he never received. When he tried to leave, staff increased his medication. He died during the night. Briar Glen called it an overdose. Mara had taken a nursing job there to find the truth. She had been collecting copies of altered records ever since. Dr. Voss was not only helping Ethan steal my company. He had built a business around making inconvenient people appear unstable. We made a plan. I would continue pretending to recover. Mara would help me send one message outside the clinic. The message went to Owen Price, a forensic accountant who had worked for my father years earlier. Owen did not trust Ethan. That was exactly why I chose him. The message contained 6 words. Find Louisiana Transport. Search Blue Cedar. A Blue Cedar was the name on one of the suspicious invoices. 3 days later, Mara slipped a folded paper under my dinner tray. It contained only a phone number and a sentence. Your husband owns the vendor. Blue Cedar. Logistics was registered through 2 shell companies. The final owner was a trust controlled by Ethan's college roommate. In 18 months, Morgan Modular had paid Blue Cedar more than $27 million. The theft was bigger than I imagined. But money was only one part of it. Ethan had also been meeting with Harrow Development, our largest competitor. Harrow wanted to buy Morgan Modular, strip its government contracts, close 3 factories, and sell the land. My company was worth more alive. But Ethan would make nearly $60 million from the sale. Natalie would receive $12 million and a senior position at Harrow. They had not only tried to steal my life. They planned to destroy the work my father and I had built. I needed to get out. Mara found the opportunity. Every Thursday, Briar Glen sent linens to an outside laundry service. The delivery truck entered through a rear gate. At 6:15 in the morning, one guard opened the loading bay while another signed paperwork inside. Mara gave me maintenance clothes, a cap, and an employee badge belonging to a woman on vacation. My left wrist was still weak. My ribs hurt when I breathed deeply. I had no money, no phone, and no identification. But at 6:12 on a cold Thursday morning, I pushed a rolling cart through the laundry corridor. The camera turned left. I turned right. The truck driver did not look at my face. He complained about the weather while I climbed into the back between bags of sheets. When the rear doors closed, I was surrounded by darkness and the smell of bleach. For the first time in 36 days, no one knew where I was. I should have gone to the police. That is what reasonable people say. But Ethan had already prepared for that. He had medical records saying I was unstable. He had a psychiatrist willing to testify. He had video of me stumbling. He had statements from employees who saw me confused. He had a signed document giving him control. If I walked into a police station with no identification and accused my husband, my sister, my doctor, and a major corporation of conspiracy, I would be returned to Briar Glen before dinner. So I disappeared. Owen arranged a room above an empty veterinary office outside Murfreesboro. The building belonged to his cousin. No one lived there, and the security cameras were disconnected. When I arrived, Owen barely recognized me. My face was pale. My hair had been cut at the clinic after blood dried into it. I had lost 18 pounds. He wanted to call an attorney. I said, "Not yet." I needed proof that could survive every lie Ethan had built. For the next 2 months, Owen and I followed the money. Blue Cedar was only the beginning. Ethan had created consulting contracts, equipment leases, and emergency procurement agreements. The money moved through Delaware, Nevada, and the Cayman Islands before returning to accounts connected to him. Natalie had approved false charity, payments to a foundation she secretly controlled. She used part of the money to buy a condominium in Miami and part to pay gambling debts. I stared at the documents for hours. I remembered helping her with college applications. I remembered giving her a job when no one else would trust her with a budget. I remembered standing beside her at our father's grave. The betrayal was not one decision. It was hundreds of decisions, made quietly, while she hugged me and called me her best friend. Owen found something worse. My car had been serviced the day before the crash by a company called Ridgeway Fleet Solutions. Morgan Modular had never used Ridgeway before. The work order said the brake system had been inspected. The mechanic who signed it did not exist. But a traffic camera near the repair shop showed Ethan's executive assistant driving my car away that evening. Her name was Paige Linton. Paige was 29, efficient, and terrified of losing her job. Owen discovered that Ethan had paid off $40,000 of her student loans through Blue Cedar. I wanted to confront her. Owen said it was too dangerous, so we waited until she made a mistake. She made it on a Tuesday night. Paige left the office at 8:40, drove to a bar near the airport, and met Dr. Voss in a corner booth. Owen sat 3 tables away with a recording device inside his briefcase. They were arguing. Paige said the crash had not been part of the agreement. She said she had only been told to take the car for servicing and deliver an envelope. Docker. Voss told her to keep quiet. Then Paige asked a question that changed everything. What happens when they declare her dead? Dr. Voss answered. The same thing that happens to every missing patient. Eventually, people stopped looking. They were going to declare me dead. Ethan had already filed a petition based on my disappearance, my supposed mental condition, and evidence that I had been suicidal. He planned to use the legal declaration to settle ownership questions before the Harrow sale. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. That gave us a deadline. We still needed evidence from inside Morgan Modular. I knew the company's original server system better than Ethan did. Years earlier, after a ransomware attack, my father and I created an offline backup procedure. Once each week, a copy of sensitive financial and design files was stored on a physical server in a locked room beneath the original factory. Ethan believed the room had been decommissioned. It had not. Only 3 people knew the access code. My father was dead. I had vanished. The 3rd person was my sister. That made the backup room our greatest opportunity and our greatest risk. I returned to the factory at 2 a.m, wearing a maintenance uniform and a dark wig. Owen waited in a van 2 blocks away. The old building was almost empty. Harrow had already begun moving operations to a newer site, even though the sale was not final. My access card had been cancelled, but the loading dock used a mechanical override during power tests. I opened it with a key my father had hidden inside an electrical panel 15 years earlier. He always believed in backups. I reached the basement without being seen. The server room smelled like dust and warm metal. I entered the code. The light turned green. Inside were years of files Ethan thought no longer existed. I connected a drive and began copying. At 63%, I heard footsteps. Not 1 person. 2. A man's voice said. The door was open. A woman answered. It cannot be. Natalie. I looked around. There was no second exit. The server racks stood in 3 narrow rows. I slipped behind the last one and pressed myself against the wall. The door opened. Light moved across the floor. Natalie entered with a security guard. She wore a long cream coat and high heels. Even at 2 a.m, she looked prepared for a camera. The guard checked the room. I could hear my own breathing. The copy reached 78%. Natalie walked closer. Then her phone rang. She answered sharply. It was Ethan. I could hear his voice through the speaker. Though not every word, Natalie said. I told you the old server should have been destroyed. She listened. Then she said, do not blame me. You were the one who wanted her alive. My blood went cold. The guard turned toward the sound of the copying drive. At that moment, every light in the basement went out. Owen had cut power from the exterior junction box. The emergency lights flickered red. I pulled the drive free at 86% and moved between the racks. The guard shouted. Natalie screamed when I brushed past her coat. I ran through the door, up the stairs, and across the loading floor. Behind me, the guard called for backup. I reached the loading dock as the exterior lights came on. For half a second, Natalie saw my face. She stopped running. She whispered, Claire. I could have answered. I did not. I disappeared into the rain. The copied files gave us what we needed. There were internal messages between Ethan and Harrow executives. There were drafts of my medical leave announcement, written before my first appointment with Dr. Voss. There were emails discussing how my condition could be used to trigger a forced sale clause. And there was an audio file. My father had installed voice, logging in the old executive conference room after a contract dispute. Most recordings were automatically deleted after 90 days, but the old backup had preserved several damaged files. One of them captured a conversation between Ethan and Natalie 8 months before my crash. Ethan said he could handle the board. Natalie said she could handle the press. Then she asked, "What about Claire?" Ethan replied, "We make her unreliable before we make her disappear." That sentence was enough to destroy them. But the final twist was still hidden. Owen found it inside the blue folder my father had signed before his death. The folder had not been lost. It had been stored with the original incorporation records at a law firm in Memphis. My father's attorney had retired, and the younger partners did not know its importance. Inside was the fire door. My father had created a special class of voting, share called the founder's share. It carried no financial value and could not be sold. But it gave its owner the power to block any sale of Morgan Modular if there was evidence of fraud, coercion, or incapacity created by an interested officer. The founder's share belonged to me. If I died, it transferred not to Ethan, not to Natalie, and not to my estate. It transferred to an employee trust. Ethan knew the share existed, but he believed my signature at Briar Glen had canceled it. He had not noticed that I signed Clara. The transfer was invalid. For the first time since the crash, I laughed. Not because the danger was over. Because my father had been right. He had built a fire door. Now I only had to wait until Ethan and Natalie locked themselves inside the burning room. The declaration hearing happened first. I did not attend. My attorney appeared privately before the judge with evidence that I was alive and the subject of a criminal conspiracy. The court sealed the filing and delayed any public announcement. Ethan believed he had won. 2 days later, Morgan Modular announced a memorial shareholder meeting at the Westbridge Hotel. Ethan would honor my legacy, complete the Harrow sale, and accept his new role as regional chairman. Natalie arranged the event. She selected my photograph, wrote the tribute, and borrowed our mother's pearls from a safe deposit box she thought would soon belong to her. 300 people attended: investors, employees, reporters, state officials, Harrow executives, members of the board. Mara came too, wearing a navy dress and carrying copies of Briar Glen's altered medical records. Paige sat beside federal investigators in a private room upstairs. After hearing the recording of Dr. Voss, she agreed to cooperate. Owen controlled the presentation system from the hotel's production booth, and I waited across the street until 9 o'clock. When I entered the ballroom, Ethan was saying, Claire believed a company should be measured by the number of lives it protected. Then he saw me. His face changed before the room did. The tears vanished. The microphone slipped in his hand. Natalie turned around. Her fingers rose to my mother's pearls. No one spoke. I walked down the center aisle. A reporter stood. Then another. Phones lifted into the air. Ethan tried to recover. He said, "Claire, thank God. You need medical attention." His voice was gentle, exactly as he had practiced. I stopped 10 feet from the stage. I said, "I already received medical attention. That is why Dr. Voss is being arrested this morning." The ballroom erupted. Ethan stepped away from the podium. Natalie remained frozen. I looked at the screen behind them. "My obituary is very moving," I said. "But the ending is inaccurate." Owen changed the slide. The memorial photograph disappeared. In its place appeared a diagram of Blue Cedar Logistics, the shell companies, and the accounts connected to Ethan. $27 million. Then came the false charity payments connected to Natalie. Then the work order from Ridgeway Fleet Solutions. Then the traffic camera image of Paige driving my car. Ethan shouted that the presentation was fabricated. So I played the audio. His own voice filled the ballroom. We make her unreliable before we make her disappear. There are moments when a lie collapses all at once. You can see it happen in people's faces. Board members who had defended Ethan looked down. Harrow executives began whispering to their attorneys. Employees stared at Natalie, as if they had never seen her before. Ethan moved toward me. 2 federal agents stepped from the side aisle. He stopped. Natalie began crying, not quietly, not gracefully. She grabbed the microphone and said Ethan had controlled everything. She said he had threatened her. She said she had only tried to protect the company. I let her speak. Then Owen displayed an email she had written. It said, "Once Claire is legally dead, I want my payment before Ethan receives his." Natalie's crying stopped. I climbed the stage. The Harrow contract was still on the table. Ethan's signature was at the bottom. Natalie's was beside it. The board had approved the sale minutes before I entered. All it needed was confirmation that my voting rights had transferred. Ethan looked at me and said, "You signed them over." I opened the Briar Glen document. I pointed to the signature. "Clara Morgan signed them over," I said. "You have been married to Claire for 11 years. Someone in the room laughed. It spread in a low wave. Ethan stared at the page as if the letters might change. Then I placed the founder's share on top of the Harrow contract. "My father gave me the right to block any sale, created through fraud or coercion," I said. "I am blocking this one." The Harrow chairman stood and announced that his company was withdrawing immediately. He also said Harrow would cooperate with investigators. That was a lie. Harrow knew more than it admitted. But it was a useful lie, because it ended the deal in front of every camera in the room. Federal agents arrested Ethan for fraud, conspiracy, unlawful imprisonment, and attempted murder. He did not look at me while they placed him in handcuffs. He looked at the board members. Even then, he cared more about status than guilt. Natalie was arrested 20 minutes later. She asked to speak to me privately. I refused. For months, she had used my love as evidence that I would forgive her. I needed her to understand that love was not the same as permission. Dr. Voss was taken from Briar Glen in front of his staff. Investigators closed the clinic and recovered records connected to 17 other families. Mara's evidence reopened the investigation into her son's death. Paige received a reduced sentence in exchange for testimony. She admitted delivering the envelope to the repair shop and helping falsify my schedule, but she insisted she did not know the brakes would be damaged. I believed her. Believing her did not erase what she had done. The legal cases lasted almost 2 years. Ethan pleaded not guilty until Owen found a private insurance policy worth $30 million that Ethan had taken out on my life 4 months before the crash. After that, he accepted a plea agreement that kept him in federal prison for 23 years. Natalie testified against him. She received 8 years for fraud, conspiracy, and false imprisonment. At her sentencing, she finally looked at me. She said, "I thought you would always save me." I answered, "I tried." That is how you learned you never had to save yourself? Those were the last words I spoke to my sister. People often ask whether revenge made me feel better. The honest answer is complicated. Watching Ethan lose the company did not repair my ribs. Hearing the judge sentence Natalie did not give me back the nights I spent locked inside Briar Glen. Money recovered from hidden accounts did not restore the years when I believed my marriage was real. Revenge did not heal me. Truth did. Justice did. Choice did. For months, every person around me had made choices about my life. Where I could go. What I could sign. Whether I was believable. Whether I was sane. Whether I was alive. Walking into that ballroom gave those choices back to me. I returned as chief executive long enough to stabilize Morgan Modular. Then I changed the company in a way Ethan would have hated. I transferred 5% of the business to an employee trust. The people who welded frames, drove trucks, answered emergency calls, and installed roofs became owners. We used recovered money to reopen the 3 factories Harrow planned to close. We also created the Henry Morgan Foundation, which builds temporary housing for women leaving abusive homes and for patients discharged from unethical treatment centers. Mara became the foundation's first director of patient advocacy. Owen joined our board and still complains about every expense report over $50. I kept my father's blue folder in the top drawer of my desk. Sometimes, late in the evening, I opened it and read his notes. On the final page, beneath the legal language, he had written one sentence by hand. Claire will know when to use this. For a long time, I cried whenever I saw those words. Then one evening, I carried the folder downstairs to the old factory floor. The night crew was finishing a set of emergency homes for families displaced by a wildfire in Colorado. Sparks flashed across the steel frames. Radios played. Forklifts moved between rows of walls that would soon become kitchens, bedrooms, and safe places to sleep. A young welder named Jasmine waved when she saw me. She had joined the company through a training program we created after the employee trust took control. She once told me the job helped her leave a dangerous marriage. That night, she lifted her helmet and asked why I was smiling. I looked around at the company my husband had tried to sell, the workers my sister had treated like numbers, and the buildings my father once sketched with me on a wooden bench. I said, I was just checking that everything still fits together. And it did. Not the way it had before. Better. Stronger. Built with fire doors. Ethan and Natalie wrote my obituary because they believed my life was something they could edit, sign, and sell. They were wrong. They wrote the ending before I was dead. So I came back, took the pen from their hands, and finished the story myself.